Welcome to today's explainer. Look, if you've got ADHD, you already know what it's like to navigate a world that just, well, it feels completely out of sync with your brain, right? But when it comes to food, that struggle can feel especially overwhelming. If you feel trapped by endless cravings and those brutal, intense sugar crashes, I am here to tell you right now, it is not a lack of willpower. Seriously, it's not. You are fighting a biological and environmental reality. Today, we're going to use the latest science to map out an escape route, and it's specifically tailored for our brains that are constantly seeking dopamine and, let's be honest, struggling with executive function.
Here's our 6-step roadmap for today. We'll unpack the food addiction trap, how foods are engineered to hijack us, the biology of cravings, why moderation is kind of a myth, how to build your own ego-syntonic plan, and finally, a framework for lasting behavior change.
Okay, let's dive into section 1, the food addiction trap. Why we feel stuck.
Have you ever found yourself just staring into the pantry, feeling completely out of control, caught in this relentless cycle of endless hunger and shame? For ADHD brains, our lower baseline of dopamine means we are naturally wired to seek out quick hits of reward. And food? Well, food is the easiest, most accessible hit available. We get stuck, and then we blame ourselves. So I want to ask you this directly, right off the bat. Is food addiction real, or is it really just a lack of willpower? We've been told our whole lives to just eat less and move more. But for someone caught in the grip of carb and sugar addiction, telling them to just use more willpower is like telling someone in a hurricane to just stand firmer. It makes no sense. It completely ignores the biochemical reality of what is happening inside our bodies. To answer that, listen to Dr. Chris Van Teleken. He's an infectious diseases doctor and researcher, and he clearly states, food is as addictive as nicotine, as drugs of abuse, as alcohol. It's just as hard to quit. I really want you to let that sink in for a second. It shifts the blame entirely away from your character, your willpower, and your executive function, and places it squarely on the substance itself. Which brings us to section 2, engineered to be addictive, the invisible forces, because guys, we are fighting a rigged system. See, the food environment we live in today is definitely not the environment our biology evolved to handle. We need to identify exactly what it is we're addicted to. We're talking specifically about ultra-processed food, or UPF. The formal scientific definition basically boils down to this. If it's wrapped in plastic and contains at least one ingredient you would never find in a standard home kitchen, things like emulsifiers, xanthan gum, or glucose syrup, it is ultra-processed. And here's the kicker. These products aren't designed for nourishment. They are designed by food scientists for profit. Just notice their intentional commercial traits. They're exceptionally soft, meaning you chew less and swallow faster. They're extremely dry for shelf life, which makes them incredibly energy dense. And they are hyper-palatable, delivering this massive dopamine spike that our ADHD brains absolutely crave. Because of this intentional design, you end up consuming twice as many calories before your fullness hormones even have a chance to tell your brain, hey, stop eating. Let's move to section 3, the biology of cravings, starch, sugar, and insulin. We really need to look at our internal biology to understand how the body actually processes these engineered foods. There's this massive myth out there about healthy complex starches. We often think we're eating a sensible, healthy bowl of cereal or brown toast. But what does your body actually see? Dr. David Unwin, who's a pioneering low-carb general practitioner, points out that a starch molecule is literally just a long string of glucose. The very moment it hits your digestion, it instantly breaks down into pure sugar. Get ready for an aha moment. Dr. Unwin ran the clinical numbers on the glycemic index and found that a small 30-gram bowl of standard cornflakes acts exactly like 8.4 teaspoons of sugar in your bloodstream. 8.4. For an ADHD individual who might grab a quick bowl of cereal just because it's easy and requires zero executive function to prepare, you are unknowingly setting off a massive biochemical sugar bomb in your blood first thing in the morning. And here is the consequence of that sugar bomb. That massive glucose spike triggers your body to release an absolute flood of insulin. Now, insulin is a diligent hormone. Its main job is to get that dangerous sugar out of your blood. But where does it put it? It stores it as belly fat and liver fat. But wait, it gets worse. High insulin completely blocks your body from burning stored fat, so this leaves your cells literally crying out for energy, keeping you constantly ravenously hungry. You are actually starving on a cellular level while simultaneously storing fat. All right, section 4, moderation versus abstinence, rethinking the rules. This brings us to a major clash between traditional advice and the reality of addiction.
So the crucial point is, we're constantly told to just enjoy everything in moderation, right? But let's look at why that fails so spectacularly for so many of us. One of Dr. Unwin's patients, who successfully put his diabetes into remission after a lifelong struggle with his weight, stated it perfectly. He said, "Moderation is not possible if you are carb addicted." For someone with an addicted brain, especially an ADHD brain that already struggles with impulsivity, eating just one cookie is biologically impossible. Abstinence from your specific trigger foods isn't a restriction. It's an incredibly liberating relief from that constant, exhausting mental negotiation of should I or shouldn't I? If you've tried and failed before, let's examine the triple dip weight graph. This is real clinical data from a patient. Notice the relapses? We really need to reframe this. Relapse is not a failure. It's a vital, necessary data gathering step. Attempt 1 taught him his trigger points. Attempt 2 taught him his boundaries. By attempt 3, he had mastered his environment for sustained success. You aren't failing. You are just learning exactly how to overcome your unique addiction. Let's transition to section 5, your ego-syntonic plan, making it yours. Now that we've agitated the problem and looked at the biology, let's shift to the psychological solution. We need to introduce the vocabulary required to build a sustainable path forward that actually works for you. Dr. Susan Pierce Thompson, an expert in the psychology of eating, introduces us to this brilliant concept, ego-syntonic. This simply means doing something that is deeply aligned with your true identity, your core values, and the person you genuinely want to be. A rigorous eating plan only lasts if it feels ego-syntonic. If you feel like you're constantly fighting yourself, it's not going to work. It has to feel like it's truly yours. So, how do we make it yours? Well, first, accept that there is no perfect off-the-shelf plan. Especially for ADHD folks, a rigid, generic template will almost always lead to burnout. You absolutely must adjust the rules to fit your daily lifestyle. If you need to prep all your food on Sundays because your weekdays are totally chaotic, do it. Let go of the guilt of modifying a program. Build solely on what works for your unique brain, your track record, and your personal data. Which brings us to our final section, Section 6, Hope and Behavior Change, the GRIN model. Let's move into a psychological framework for actually putting this newfound freedom into practice. Clinical health psychologist Dr. Jen Unwin created this beautifully simple model for behavior change called the GRIN model. G stands for goals. Define your destination. R is for resources. Tap into your past successes and your support network. I is for increments. And listen, this is massive for ADHD. Don't try to change everything overnight. Take tiny, proximal, doable steps. And finally, N is for noticing. We're so conditioned to only notice our failures. You must actively train your brain to notice and celebrate what is going better. We've covered a lot of ground today. You now have the scientific map to understand the biological trap of ultra-processed foods, the dopamine loop, and the psychology of behavior change. So I want to leave you with this final provocative thought to ponder today. Now that you know it's not a lack of willpower, and now that you hold the map to actually break free, what does your preferred future look like now? Thanks for joining me on this explainer. Start taking those tiny increments, and I'll catch you next time.